Alright, today we are going to factor a trinomial with a leading coefficient other than 1. So our target is I can factor a trinomial with a leading coefficient other than 1 by using the grouping method. So here's one example that is already worked out for you. So when you're factoring by grouping and your leading coefficient is not 1, in this case it's 8, then the process is just a little bit different. We're still going to look for our magic numbers, but instead of looking at numbers that multiply to give me -5, we're going to look for numbers that multiply to give me the product of the leading coefficient times the constant. So we're looking for two numbers that will multiply together to give me -40, 8 times -5. And they're still going to add together to give me that middle term, -6. Alright, so we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give me -40, add to give me -6. Those two numbers happen to be -10 and +4, because -10 times 4 is -40, and -10 plus 4 is -6. Now, here comes the part that's different. Before, those two magic numbers became your factors, but now we're going to use them to find our factors. So we're going to rewrite our original trinomial as a polynomial with 4 terms. We're going to split up the -6x and represent it as -10x plus 4, because -10x plus 4 is -6x. So we're just writing an equivalent expression and replacing it with the middle term. So now we're going to group together the first two terms, 8x squared minus 10x, and look for its common factor, which in this case, 8 and 10 have a 2 in common, x squared and x have an x in common. So we're going to pull that 2x squared out in front and figure out what we have left over. Well, 8 divided by 2 is 4, and x squared divided by x is x, so we got 4x. And then minus 10 divided by 2 is 5, and x divided by x will cancel out, so you got 4x minus 5. Now we look at the next two, and we say 4x minus 5. Well, they don't have anything in common, and when they don't have anything in common, then we write what everything has in common, the 1. So we're going to pull that 1 out in front, plus 1, plus from here, 1. And then we're left with 4x minus 5. So when we do this process, this has to happen. These two expressions inside the parentheses have to be the same thing, 4x minus 5. Because now we can pull that 4x minus 5 out and make it a factor, 4x minus 5. And then what's left over will come together to be another factor, 2x plus 1. Alright, let's look at one that we worked through together. Alright, so the first example that I have is 5x squared minus 7x plus 2. So our process is to look for two numbers that will multiply together to give me the leading coefficient times the constant, which is 10. And then these two same numbers have to add together to give me -7. So I think of all the ways that I can make 10, 1 and 10, 2 and 5, and that's it. I can put negatives in there, but those are the only two sets of numbers that will make 10. So I need two of those to add together to give me -7. Well, if I take -5 times -2, that'll give me a +10, and -5 times -2 will give me a -7. So that's your step 1, finding your magic numbers. Your step 2 is now to split up the middle term. So now we're going to write 5x squared minus 5x minus 2x plus 2. So we're going to replace the -7x with the -5x minus 2. Alright, now we're ready to take the first two terms and factor out the common factor. 5 and 5 have a 5 in common, x squared and x have an x in common. So what's left over? 5x times x will give me 5x squared, and 5x times -1 will give me a -5x. Alright, since I know I want to have an x minus 1 left in parentheses, when I look at my next two terms and I have a -2x plus 2, I see that this term is negative. And I don't want my leftovers to be negative, so I'm going to pull out a negative common factor. So if I have 2x and 2, if I have -2x and 2, what they have in common is a -2. So then -2 times x will give me 2x, And negative 2 times negative 1 will give me a positive 2. So I have what I need, that same expression inside the parentheses. So I pull that out. X minus 1 is a factor. And then my leftovers. 5x minus 2 is a factor. So those are the factors of our original trinomial. All right, let's look at another example. 6x squared minus 13x plus 5. The process is the same. I'm still looking for two numbers that'll multiply together to give me my leading coefficient times my constant, which is 30, and then add together to give me negative 13. So I think of the ways I can make 30. 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, and 5 and 6. So I need two sets that will add together to give me 13. And I say, oh, if I do negative 3 and negative 10, that'll multiply to give me 30. And it'll add together to give me negative 13. So now I rewrite 6x squared minus 3x minus 10x plus 5. So I rewrite this negative 13x as my magic numbers. So I have now a polynomial with 4 terms. Now I factor out the common factor of the first two. So 6 and 3 have a 3 in common. X squared and x have an x in common. So 2x times 3x will give me 6x squared. And then 3x times negative 1 will give me a negative 3x. Now my second one, negative 10x and a positive 5. And I see here that this leftover is positive, so I want to pull out a negative common factor, which is a negative 5. Excuse me. So I got negative 5 times 2x will give me negative 10x, and negative 5 times a negative 1 will give me a positive 5. So inside the parentheses, you see that I have the same expression. So that becomes one of my factors. And then what's left over becomes the other. All right, sorry for the coughing. All right, third problem. 8x squared plus 18x minus 9. So I'm still looking for two numbers that multiply together to give me 8 times 9, which is 72, and that add together to give me 18. So we want to look at all the ways that we can make 72 and play around with those factors. I'll give you some time to think about it. You can always get your calculator, if you don't know them, right off the top, and take 72 divided by 2, and that gives me 2 and 36. 72 divided by 3, 3 and 24. 72 divided by 4, 4 and 18. 72 divided by 5 isn't going to work because it doesn't end in a 0 or a 5. So 72 divided by 6, 6 and 12. 72 divided by 7, nope, divided by 8. And then you get your 8 and your 9. So those are all the ways that we can make 72. So I need two of them to add together to be 18. And that happens to be 6 and 2. Since both are positive, it'll be a positive 6 and a positive 12, a positive 6 and a positive 12. So now we rewrite 8x squared plus 6x plus 12x plus 9. So we replace 18x with the 6x plus 12. So now I look at my first two sets, 8x squared plus 6x. They have a 2x in common. So 4x times 2x will give me 8x squared, and 2x times 3 will give me 6x. And then 12x and 3, they have a 3 in common. So 3 times 4x will give me 12x, and 3 times 3 will give me 9. So again, it works because I have the same thing underneath, inside the parentheses. So I pull that out in front, 4x plus 3, and then my leftovers come together to make the second factor, 2x plus 3. Close parentheses. All right, I have 2 more examples for you. So I got 7x squared minus 4x minus 3. So I'm looking for 2 numbers that will multiply together to give me negative 3 times 7, which is negative 21. And that will add together to give me negative 4. So if we think about all the ways that we can make 21, 1 and 21, 2, 3 and 7, and that's it. There isn't any other ways that we can make 21. So which ones can give us 4? Well, if I take 7 minus 3, I'll get a positive 4. But if I take 3 minus 7, that'll give me my negative 4. So I'm going to do negative 7 times a positive 3. So I'm going to replace this negative 4x with negative 7x plus 3. So 7x squared minus 7x plus 3x minus 3. Look at the first 2 terms. They have a 7x in common. So 7x times x will give me 7x squared. And 7x times negative 1 will give me a negative 7x. And then 3x minus 3, that has a 3 in common, so I'll pull out a positive 3. So 3 times x will give me 3x, and 3 times negative 1 will give me negative 3. So x minus 1 is the common factor, so you pull that out in front, and you're left with 7x plus 3 to create your second factor. So your answer is x minus 1 times 7x plus 3. Alright, last problem. 11x squared plus 14x minus 16. So I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply together to give me 11 times negative 16, which ends up being negative 176. And then I need them to add together to be 14. So this one's a bigger number, so I would use my calculator to find the factors. So I'll do 176 divided by 2. So I get 2 and 88. And then 176 divided by 3 doesn't work. 176 divided by 4, 4 and 44. And then 176, 5 won't work, so we'll go to 6. 6 doesn't work. 176 divided by 7 is not going to work. 8, 8 and 22. And I'm going to stop right there because if I take 22 minus 8, I get 14, and that's what I want to happen. So I need them to multiply together to give me a negative 176 and add to give me a 14, so I want my bigger number to be positive. So I'll have a 22 times a negative 8 and a 22 plus a negative 8. So now we split up the middle term, 11x squared plus 22x minus 8x minus 16. So if I look at the first 2 terms, 11 and 22 have an 11 in common. X squared and x have an x in common. So what's left over? Well, 11x times x will give me 11x squared. And 11x times 2 will give me 22x. Now I know in my leftover I have a positive x, so when I see this term's negative, so I'm going to pull out the negative common factor. So negative 8 and negative 16 have a negative 8 in common. So negative 8 times x will give us negative 8x. And negative 8 times a positive 2 will give us a negative 16. So I pull out the x plus 2 because it's common. And then what's left over? 11x minus 8 becomes my second factor. So x plus 2 times 11x minus 8 is our factor, are the factors of that trinomial. All right, tomorrow in class we'll practice some more so that we can get more comfortable with our target of I can factor a trinomial with a leading coefficient other than 1 by using the grouping method.